I get excited about it because I think most people undervalue the marketing aspect of their business. And they do it for a couple of reasons. The first one is they don't understand the enormity of growth that you can get through marketing. So they have a funny concept around marketing when we talk about budgets. How much should you spend on marketing? The typical comment is the least amount possible. The other comment we hear is 3% of revenue. And to me, all of these numbers are just wrong, right? To me, marketing should not be measured by how much you control it. It should be measured by what the return is on that marketing. And so what I wanted to go through today is a couple of concepts that we've talked about in the past, but I'm going to also share our own experience. Because for me, lead generation has always been a bit of a puzzle. And getting it right is not really about does Facebook marketing work or does this work? That's not the question we're going to answer today. The question we're going to answer today is how much money should you be throwing at it? And how do you measure whether that's actually a viable amount of money for you? So probably a couple of things I want to talk about first here. Let me see if I've got this in order. The first thing I really want to touch on is this whole notion of this thing called your perfect future client. Some people know this as your target market, your ideal client, and it's about definition. I'm not going to ask you to do this today, but if you haven't got in writing who your target market is, as in who it is physically, the person, the persona, or the avatar, you know, sometimes you can do this by looking at your existing client base and identifying who your best clients are. If you deal with larger organizations, like I know a few of you do, it's not the organization who's your target market, it's the person who holds the purse strings, right? Who's the decision maker within that organization? Because what we need to understand is intimately everything we can about that person, okay? Now, once you know who your perfect future client is, this is just the starting blocks, right? This just allows us to say, all right, I know who I'm looking for, okay? Now, when we go looking for these people, there's a few things that we need to think about, okay? So the first thing is that different people in our target market are at different levels of consciousness or what we call buyer intent, okay? And when we talk about buyer intent, it's almost like a pyramid. At the top of that buyer intent pyramid, there's a thing called people who are most likely to buy, okay? And they're most aware, okay? And what I mean by that is they know who you are, they know what you do, they're aware of their need, and they're basically coming to you to buy. Now, the good thing about the most aware people is they're easy to sell to because they're knocking on the door and they're going, hey, you know, Neville, I need to get some people in the Philippines. Can you get them for me, right? They're aware, right? You don't have to educate them about outsourcing, not outsourcing. They are just aware and they're easy to market to. But the problem is it's a very small part of this sort of cycle. So then we've got next level, and the next level is what we would call product aware, right? Which means they understand what your product is, right? But they're not sort of connecting the dots and understanding how it benefits them. So they're sort of product aware and they get it, but what they're missing is that I need this thing right now, okay? And as we go down here, we keep moving into different levels. So the next level down is a thing that I would call solution aware. So they know there's a solution to their problem, but they're not aware that it's your product that is the solution, okay? And so they're less educated as a prospect. And the reason I'm sort of showing you these levels is that you have to choose where you market, because as we go down, your marketing becomes more expensive, okay? But also the market is broader. So people who are solution aware are pretty good because they know that there's a problem that can be solved and they have a solution. One step down from that is a thing called being problem aware. So the distinction is I have a problem. I don't know if there's a solution. So you can see there's a lot of education for a problem aware person because they have to connect the dots between their problem and your solution. So we're getting down to the sort of bigger end of the market. And then the last one down here is probably the worst of all, is people who have no idea. So they're completely unaware. They don't even know they have a problem. Now, you can have an ideal perfect future client that fits into any one of these categories. And when you're marketing your organization, you're hoping that they're most aware because they come in and they buy straight away. But some people that you're marketing to, you find your perfect future client and you say, you know what, it's a company that does XYZ, or it's a person that does XYZ, but you don't know what level of knowledge they have. And your marketing, if it doesn't hit them between the eyes, it's ineffective. So I'll give you an example. If someone is solution aware, right, and we might sort of go into, Richard, I know that you're in private investigation, they need a PI, right, to get a problem resolved. So they're solution aware. They go into Google and they type in PI, private investigator, they find you, they speak to you, and they're ready to go, right? They know that you've got some services, you get them product aware, and all of a sudden you've got a client. But the people who are completely unaware, they're not looking, right? So they're not Googling, right? They're not Googling your product, certainly, and they're not even Googling their problem because they're completely unaware. And this is where we start shifting gears and we say, well, instead of going into AdWords advertising, which is useful for people searching, we might need to go into communities and start creating awareness of problems that people don't even know they have. Is this making sense? So when we think about how we're going to market, we have to decide which one of these are we going to market to, because the messages are very, very different. And if you're not sort of aware of which segment of this market you're marketing to, your marketing materials will miss, right? They won't actually produce a result. And you'll put your advertising in, you'll say, geez, I've got my advertising in there and I'm just not getting any valid prospects out of it. And it could be because you're not hitting them where they are at. Does that make sense? So not only do we need to know our perfect future client, I want to know what stage of this pyramid they're at for the marketing that you're putting out there. All right. Because different stages of this pyramid will cause you to market in a different way. All right. So I'm just trying to give you a setup of awareness. Now, for us, to give you the personal example, when people need a business coach, it's easy, right? They Google business coach. We pay lots of money to be on page 1 for Google, and they'll ring us, but we're in a cage fight. When people are product aware, they sort of are Googling and they know what they're looking for. When people are solution aware, they're probably less aware of us and they know that there's some help out there, so they need educating. When people are problem aware, our marketing has to talk about the problems they face rather than the solutions that we provide. But the completely unaware ones are the hardest ones, but they're also the best clients, right? Because they come in and they realize that there's a light at the end of the tunnel. Now, our strategy for completely unaware is we use our partner network and we run events. And I know a few of you guys have been through those events, and you sit there and you're listening to the accountant, you're listening to the marketing guy, and you're listening to this coach. And you go, well, this guy seems to understand us. So you go from completely unaware that you have a problem to there's a guy that actually can help us. So I want you to think about what this means to you. All right. Let's talk about this next stage, which is quite important. And it's going to come down to the numbers. Now, you've probably heard me talk about a thing called acquisition cost. And to me, this is probably the most important marketing number that you can know, acquisition cost. And it's literally how much are you paying for a client? Now, I want to talk a bit more about this than rather just the theory. And what I mean by that is, who knows what their acquisition cost is right now on the call? Does anyone know this? Yeah, it's interesting, right? Because I asked this question of hundreds and hundreds of business owners and no one knows the answer. Do you know what it means by definition? Who knows what acquisition cost is? Anybody? Just unmute someone.
The dollar value to acquire a customer?
Yeah, it's a dollar value to acquire a customer. Now, there's two things you need to know: what it is costing you right now, and what are you willing to spend. Okay, so what's it costing you right now is a mathematical equation. It's very easy. I would look at your expenses for the last month. How much did you spend on advertising? How much did you spend on salespeople? And if you're doing the sales yourself, how much of your time did you spend in that area, right? And that's a dollar value that you would spend that month. Now, you look at how many new clients you got in that month as well. And generally speaking, if I got one client and I spent 10 grand, my acquisition cost was 10,000 for that client. Now, some people will say, but we do sales and marketing and it takes 3 months or a year. You can normalize it up to your own way. I don't care how you do it. What I do need you to do is start assessing what your actual acquisition cost is right now. Now, that's only one piece of the puzzle. The second piece of the puzzle is how much are you willing to pay for a client? right? So instead of just acquisition cost, I want you to sort of change this up, and I want to have a number which is what's called the maximum allowable acquisition cost. Maximum allowable acquisition cost. Now, how do we calculate that number? Any ideas? How would we calculate maximum allowable acquisition cost?
I suppose calculate over a period of time that client's going to give you money or give you revenue.
Yes.
And work back. It should be under that figure, obviously, but
yeah,
the more under that figure it is, the higher the sort of profit will be.
Yep. So to calculate your maximum allowable acquisition cost is a scary thought, because this is how we do it. We work out how much a client is worth to us, okay, over a period of time, on average. Now, if your clients are highly variable, you're going to have to pick a segment, okay, because some people spend once, other people spend 3 or 4 times over a year, and other people have got a recurring revenue stream attached to them. So they're different segments, okay? And once you pick one of those segments, and it might be a client who spends with you, I might pick on Cameron. People buy bikes from you, right? Can you work with me on this? Let's get John muted.
Yep.
How much does the average guy spend with you?
Our average dollar sale is literally about $2 grand.
$2 grand. And how often do they spend with you?
Well, they're only doing the $2 grand purchase once, but the progression from there is that it becomes 4 to 5, and the next one's 7 to 8.
Sorry, so 4 to 5 grand the next bike, and 7 to 8 on the next one.
Yeah.
Over what period of time?
Usually you see that transition over probably 2 to 3 years.
Okay, so over 3 years, we've got 2 grand, 4 grand, and 8 grand. So it's like 14,000. Yep. What sort of profit? Roughly.
Say 25 to 30 at a guess.
25%. So 25% of 14 grand is 3,500. So here's my thing, right? If I said to you, I've got 3.5 grand in cash that I'm going to hand over to you, how much would you be prepared to pay me? This is a trick question, by the way, because I'm not going to give you 3.5 grand. But hypothetically, if I did, you'd give me something like 3 grand, right? Did you just say, here's 3 grand, thanks 3.5, I just made $500 in a transaction. Now, when we have businesses, right, we've got to take some risk into account. But here's my question, Cameron, knowing that there's 3.5 grand in profit on average for these guys, how much would you be willing to pay to acquire one as a business?
Well, to some degree, you'd be prepared to pay pretty much the 3.5 in the sense that what else is involved, and they're not just a bike purchaser; they're a lifelong customer, and they need other bits and pieces.
Thanks. So the sort of answer, and I'm not going to sort of make you answer this today, but I want you to be prepared to work out what's the maximum I'm willing to pay for a client, okay? Because it's going to determine how quickly you grow your business. That's what it's going to do. It's just a risk profile, okay? So there's a couple of things here. So the first one we said is, number one is you need to work out what your maximum allowable acquisition cost is. I'll get this back up on the screen. Now, we do that by working out a couple of things. The second thing that we need to know, and Cameron knew it quite well, was our average order value. Average order value. Yep. Now, the third thing that I asked Cameron to give me was, how much is that person going to spend in their lifetime? And I want to know what the maximum is here, because Cameron even said to me, well, that's 3.5 grand of known profit, but I'm willing to pay 3.5 because I'll get some other sales out of that guy as well. So we need to start thinking, what is the maximum lifetime value that a client is worth to me? Now, there are 3 very interesting numbers, because what they do is they allow us to start calculating how quickly we can grow our business. Now, for me, the only thing that should stop you marketing in your business is capacity, right? Capacity. And if you've got capacity at the moment, if you've got room in your book to take on more clients, then chances are that you're not spending enough in your marketing. And one of the reasons is because you don't know these numbers, right? First of all, you don't know what your maximum allowable acquisition cost is. So how much am I willing to pay? I don't know my average order on that maximum lifetime value. Now, for me, it's really important that this is measured in profit, by the way, not revenue. Right? It has to be profit. because that tells me that then my return on investment. Okay. Now, the reason I brought these three numbers up is because as part of homework out of today, if you do one thing in your marketing other than identifying your avatar, is to work out these three numbers, right, for those avatars. So if there's 2 or 3, then you're going to have to do it 2 or 3 times, right? If there's 1, then it becomes easier, but you've got to get used to this, because as we do this, right, what we're looking for is how do we increase the speed of growth of our business? Now, the speed of growth of your business is going to come down to this term: acquisition aggression. Acquisition aggression. Now, what do I mean by this? Okay, what I've noticed is that when we talk about spending money on marketing, you know, I used to talk about this all the time, and I said, you know, marketing needs to be self-liquidating. Okay, and what I mean by that is it should show me a profit, which means if I spend $1, I should see $1.50 back. The real question is, when should I see that $1.50? Okay, if I see it in the first transaction, that's awesome, right? Because if I go market this month and I spend money, and I might have someone like Lawrence who does SEO, here's the money for SEO, guys, take 6 months to get you on page 1. Awesome, I'll wait 6 months. But then when I'm on page 1, the leads start coming in. Okay, now if every time I get a sale, I make more money than it costs me to pay for my SEO, I mean, happy days, right? Now, that to me is what we call positive cash flow. So the 3 levels of acquisition aggression I want to talk about. So the first one over here, number 1, is what we call the mum and dad investor. Mum and dad investor. Now, these guys here, they're looking for positive cash flow. And that means that my first sale produces enough profit to cover the cost of my marketing, my first sale. So in Cameron's situation, it's the first bike, the $2,000. Okay. Now 25%, that's $500. So if I said, Cameron, I can give you one of those avatars, those clients at $500, he'd take it. He'd say, well, I don't make any profit on the first sale, but I know I'll get my second and third. But if I give him one of those for less than 500, he's a happy man, right? Because he's making profit on the first transaction. Is everyone getting this? So this is what I call the conservative investor, the mum and dad. Now, the good thing about the mum and dad investor is they look cash flow, so their marketing is a great investment. But what they're missing out on by doing that is aggression of growth, right? They're not growing as quickly as they could. So then we talk about the second one. So the second one here is what we call the break-even guy, right? Now, the break-even guy basically says, I'm willing to spend my maximum allowable acquisition cost has to equal my my profitability, equal my profit. So I'm willing to do it for neutral, right? On my first sale, so on my first sale. That's okay. That means $500 in Cameron's situation. He's willing to pay $500 every day of the week, knowing that he doesn't make a cent on the first sale, but he has faith in his business that he gets a second and third transaction. Now, the issue with that is every dollar I spend on marketing, I don't see any profit from it. But what I am seeing is my database is filling with people who have got a lifetime value of $14,000. Is everyone following me on this theory? So that's the break-even guy. And he goes, that way, I can keep investing in marketing because technically it's not coming out of my pocket, it's coming out of the sales. All right. The third one's the interesting one for me, right? The third one is the guy, right, that is the investor. Now, the investor has a different equation, right? He says, I'm happy to sink more money into marketing to get market share. So just to give you an idea, we talked about the first, let's put some numbers in here. So Cameron said first sale is 2K. Second sale was, how much was that? 5K?
Yep.
5K. Third sale was 7K, something like that. And he said all these are at 25% margin. So which means that the first sale, the margin on that was $500. The second one was, I made it hard for myself, 1,250. And the third one's 25% of 7K, which is just under 2K, 1,700, more or less. Okay. The investor says, you know what? I'm willing to spend more than $500. So So I'm willing to take this $500 here and I'm willing to sink more than that, which means I'm going to go run at a loss on my first transaction. And it's going to take me 2 to 3 years to see my profit. But what does it mean, right? What it means is that when the market gets competitive, because anyone who gets on, does anyone do Google AdWords here? Anyone a Google AdWords person? No. So Google AdWords is a very clever system, but it's competitive, right? And so when the market gets dry and people are marketing, they compete with each other. Does that make sense? Now, the same happens on any paid platform. So if you're doing paid advertising, you're going to realize that when your competitors are in there, they're just going to pay more money. The question is who pulls out when, okay? Now, for me, if I know that I'm an investor and I've got super aggressive acquisition, I don't care how much I pay, right? Because I know that in the end, there's probably 3 or 4 grand worth of profit in this guy over time. And as I acquire them and the other guys say, I can't afford to pay that much, I'm going to dominate on market share. So here, my maximum acquisition, right? My maximum allowable acquisition cost is greater than my first sale. That's why we call it being an investor, right? Because I'm going backwards, right? It's literally costing me way more in marketing than I'm making in profit. But what I'm seeing is lifetime value, because I know that the lifetime value of that client will pay back in droves. Is everyone with me on this? So here's why I'm bringing this up today, right? We've been talking, we're talking about lead generation, and I haven't given you a lead generation strategy. What I've told you is you need to know how much you're willing to spend. But I want you to leave today with one question in mind. If I said to you, you have $100,000 per month to spend on marketing, what would you spend it on? $100,000 a month to spend on marketing. What would you spend it on? Because most people can't answer that question. They give me weird answers. They say, I'd fix my website, or I'd pay some guy to do this thing, right? But what I'm talking about is if you don't have a volume control, if you don't have a marketing strategy that you can go and turn it up, then what happens is you're leaving money on the table. Because every month that you have capacity that's not being used within your organization, you cannot reclaim. And part of today is getting you to be comfortable with investing big dollars in marketing. Now, I'm not saying be naive and throw 100 grand every month. I'm saying ask the question, if I had 100,000, what would I spend it on? And if I can't answer that question, that means I haven't done the research into what the marketing strategies are. Because the first thing that you need to know to be comfortable spending 100 grand a month on marketing is what is my maximum allowable acquisition cost first? Okay, how much am I prepared to pay for a client? Now, if you can't tell me who your client is, then maybe your homework is to identify that target, right? Because I think for most of us, we don't know the true profitability of a client in the long term. We go, everybody's different, right? Well, that's your first problem. If everybody's different, then you can't have a strategy, right? Because you're just going to be throwing darts with a blindfold on. And so as soon as you know who your avatars are and you know what you're willing to spend, I'm happy to spend 100 grand a month all day long if I know that my avatar exists and I know what my maximum allowable acquisition cost is. And I'll give you our internal example. We know that we're willing to spend up to $5,000 per client to acquire a client, okay? And we know that we don't make money in the first month, 2 months or 3 months, right? We know that it takes a bit of time to get that money back. And we know there's different size clients, right? But on average, right, we know that our average order value is somewhere around that $3,000 mark, which means that we have to accommodate that. And I can tolerate it for 3 to 4 months. So knowing that I'm willing to spend that, I'm looking for people who can serve me, okay? So I had a guy I was talking to on Facebook ads, right? Now, I don't know much about Facebook ads, but I know one thing, I had a reframe, because for some people they go, oh, Facebook, I'm not into Facebook, it's not my market. That's a myth, right? If your target market, your avatar is a person, 75% or 80% of people are on Facebook, right? It's just they might not be in a group called, Physiotherapists of Australia. They might be in a group that sort of goes motorbike riding every second weekend or something like that. But it sort of comes back to what I was talking about earlier when we talked about this section here. How ready to buy are these people, right? Because the most aware people are the easiest ones to get, but the hardest ones to find, right? The product aware are easier, sort of a bit easier to find. Completely unaware is just your general target market. So when like for example, with Cameron, it's bike enthusiasts. I can go to all the bike enthusiast groups on the planet and I can plug in and market, but they'll be at different levels on this pyramid. And depending on what level on that pyramid they're in is what my message needs to be. Okay. Now, I bring all this up today and I'm conscious of time because I know for a fact that the best marketers in the world are the people who actually go and spend the cash. Yes, you can ask questions, Mark Schneider. I'm going to open the questions. Don't talk too much. Go away.
Now, can I ask now?
Yeah.
In the context of what you're talking about, we just spent 5K on a national publication magazine, 2-page advertorial with an ad for our services, which goes nationally.
Yeah.
So I spent the money. It was something new that I was a strategy we were looking at.
Yeah.
And then the guy it's a subscription, so that every 3 months they bring out the magazine. So it only come out for a week, and then the guy's pressuring me to take the next 3 months.
Yeah.
What's your? And I said, well, I haven't even tested the effectiveness of. So in the context of what we're talking about,
Yes.
have you got a comment about that?
Yeah.
Because I told him I hadn't really assessed the effectiveness yet, and I said, and he was a bit pushy, and I told him to back off, and I'll call him when I'm ready.
Yeah. One of the problems is legacy, like magazines are a legacy, right?
Yeah.
And people are moving more and more to digital marketing. So like the word digital in marketing is redundant these days, right? Because almost 90% of marketing is digital. There is still paper-based.
It comes out in both formats too. By the way. Sorry.
The magazine circulation, if you're not seeing any response to the advertising, I have a question mark around it. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, it might be your message. So going back to the pyramid, is your message landing in the right place for people to trigger? What I'm always looking for with lead generation is you're not going to get sales directly from lead gen in a lot of cases. Only the people at the top of the pyramid are ready to buy. But if your message is only targeting those people, your yield will be super low. From what you've just told me, you don't have any response to measure at this point in time.
No, I mean it's targeted because it's going to multiple avatars of ours.
Yeah.
In large numbers.
But there's no transaction. There's no engagement. There's no
Gotcha.
go to the website and download this thing. There's no register.
There's call to action in the ad and stuff, but it's
But
there's
you're not
been no
measuring
response
that, or there's no response.
at this stage yet.
Yeah. How much is it?
It was 5K.
Anyone's $5,000 for the next like.
And he
2
was
times
saying,
five.
oh, I've got another person who wants to take your spot, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
And I said, well, hang on, slow down, buddy.
Yeah. Look, the short answer for me is if I can't see any engagement return, I'm hesitant to keep going. I would have preferred you ask that question up front, because sometimes they say it's going to take 3 circulations to see any traction, but I want a number.
I'm saying that in light of like our service contracts, if we achieve 1, it's 400K a year.
Yeah.
So the end result would be fabulous. Just one, it's just got to get 1.
Yeah.
Do you do another 3 months next publications, and
Well,
I'm still ahead if I get 1.
How much are you willing to pay for one of those clients?
Well, that's what I'm going to work out. But I know how much I get, how much revenue it brings in per year.
How much is that's profit?
30%.
30% of 400K.
Yeah.
That's 130K of profit.
Yeah.
So we're talking about acquisition of clients, right? Maximum allowable acquisition is per client.
Yeah.
But what you're telling me is for 130K a year, what's the maximum you're willing to spend? Because this 15 grand you're talking about is pittance.
Yeah.
In the scheme of things. So you probably need to push the accelerator on it, but don't be naive. Right. So I'd be changing your advertising because I need those people in my database. I need to move them from leads to lead nurture. Yeah. So whatever you're doing in your advertising, it's not transacting. Okay. Yeah. So I'd be changing the messages a bit, but I'd go again because it's cheap in the scheme of things, right?
Yeah.
But I'd be working on the message to see if I can get those people into my database. We're going to run out of time, but good question.
Thank you.
I hope you got something out today, and we might get it onto a strategy card if you need to work more on it.